What kind of child cries for help in the middle of a jungle river at dawn? And why did a retired soldier's dog start barking at the water before either of them saw anyone there? The sound cut through the mist like something dying, thin, human, and horribly wrong in a forest that should have held nothing but rain, insects, and the roar of swollen water. The soldier stopped instantly. So did the German shepherd beside him. But while the man searched the main current ahead, the dog turned sharply toward a hidden side channel behind hanging roots and slick black stone, his body locking so hard it felt like the jungle itself had pointed the way. The crying came again, weaker now. That was enough. The soldier drove forward through the dripping green wall after the dog, boots ripping through mud, vines striking his shoulders. The river growing louder with every step until it stopped sounding like water and started sounding like hunger. Stay with this one. Because the child in that river was only the first thing waiting for them. The trail vanished almost immediately. What had been a narrow path turned into wet roots, broken cane, and black soil that collapsed under each step. The German shepherd moved fast but never wild, cutting left through giant ferns, clearing a fallen trunk, then dropping down a steep bank toward the sound ahead. The soldier followed without hesitation, one hand catching branches, the other already reaching for the machete at his side out of instinct older than thought. Then they hit the ledge. Below them, floodwater had slammed itself into a narrow stone basin where bamboo, branches, and storm debris spun in a choking circle before being dragged toward a white violent chute downstream. And caught in that grinding mess was a child. The life jacket flashed first, bright orange against black water. Then the small body beneath it, twisted sideways in the current, one arm pinned, face striking spray and splintered branches every time the river surged. The crying had almost stopped now. Not because she was safe. Because she was running out of strength. The soldier threw off his pack and ran along the ledge searching for a way down. The dog barked once when his boot hit slick moss near the edge, and he corrected instantly, cutting toward a crack in the rock that sloped into the basin. Water pounded below so hard it shook through the stone under his boots. He had seen rivers kill before. They looked almost calm from a distance. Up close, they were worse than gunfire because they gave a man just enough hope to step into them before they took everything else. He looped his rope hard around a thick exposed root and yanked it tight. The German shepherd dropped low beside the anchor without needing a command, braced like he knew exactly what kind of weight was about to go over the edge. Then the soldier went down. Spray hit his face cold and hard. His boot slid once, caught, then dropped into the basin. The current hit like a vehicle, twisting his bad knee and shoving at his waist hard enough to break balance, but he forced through it and lunged into the debris trap. His first grip slipped off the soaked life jacket strap. His second held. Tiny shoulder. Freezing skin. Mud-slick hair plastered across a trembling face. The child surfaced just enough to cough once and choke on river water, and he dragged her head clear while jamming his body against the branch pile to stop them both from being sucked into the chute. "I've got you," he shouted, but the river tore the words apart. He reached deeper with his free hand, trying to find what had pinned her in place. It was not just branches. Something tougher held the jacket down, a strip of black webbing wound tight through the debris, as if she had not been trapped by accident at all. Above him, the German shepherd barked once. Then again. Not at the child. At something farther down. The soldier looked up. The dog stood rigid on the ledge, staring past the basin toward the downstream cut, where heavier debris rolled through white water between two dark stones. At first, he saw only foam and broken wood. Then something metallic turned beneath the spray. A case. Military gray. Heavy. One corner split open from impact. Inside, through the torn edge, something flashed deep yellow. Gold. And strapped across the top of that case with rotting black webbing was a human arm. For one dead second, everything inside the soldier went still. Then the child jerked weakly against his grip, and his eyes dropped back to the strap pinning her life jacket in the debris. Same black webbing. Same material. She had come into this river with that case. Or with whoever had been moving it. The German shepherd's barking changed again, lower now, harder, no longer fixed on the gold or the severed arm, but on the jungle bank beyond the chute where thick brush leaned low over the water in a dark, motionless wall. The soldier felt that change before he named it. That was no discovery bark. That was threat. Something alive was in those trees. Something close enough to watch him standing waist-deep in floodwater, with a drowning child in one arm, and a case full of gold turning in the current below. Then, from inside the brush, came a small metallic sound that did not belong to the jungle. A rifle being chambered. The soldier did not think when he heard the rifle. Men who survive long enough in bad places learn that thought comes second when metal speaks first. He dropped instantly, dragging the child down against his chest as the first shot cracked through the basin and punched splinters off the branch pile, where his head had been a heartbeat earlier. The German shepherd exploded into a savage barking fury from the ledge above, not blind panic, but targeted warning, every bark fixed on the same patch of brush beyond the chute. The soldier twisted sideways in the current, using his own body and the debris cluster to shield the child while water slammed into his ribs hard enough to steal half a breath. The second shot came lower, flatter, striking rock and spraying stone chips into the basin. Not a warning shot. Not some frightened poacher firing wild. Whoever was in that brush knew exactly where to aim, and exactly what needed to die first. The child. The soldier. Maybe even the dog after that. No witnesses. No story. No gold case dragged into daylight. Above him, the shepherd's barking shifted once, then twice, each burst tight and violent, and the soldier knew what that meant too. The shooter was moving. He forced his head low and yanked again at the life jacket strap pinned in the debris. The black webbing would not give. It had been looped, cinched, and caught under a snapped branch fork so tight the flood had only buried it deeper. The child made a weak broken sound against his shoulder and tried to breathe, but every breath came in little panic jerks that told him shock was already eating what little strength remained. He could not leave her. He could not stand exposed in that basin either. One more clean angle from the brush, and the whole thing was over. The old soldier looked once toward the ledge, saw only spray and rock and the blur of the German shepherd moving too fast to track, and made the ugliest choice available because ugly choices are usually the only honest ones in places like this. He drove the machete down into the branch jam, not to hack randomly, but to cut the trapped webbing where it disappeared under the child's side. Water fought the blade. Branches kicked back. The first cut bit wood. The second hit strap. The third almost tore the handle from his hand, when the current surged and twisted his body half sideways. Then the rifle fired again, closer now, from farther left than before. The shooter was working down the bank, trying to open a cleaner lane through the brush. The German shepherd solved part of that problem before the soldier could even look up. There came one deep ripping growl from the ledge, then the crash of a heavy body hitting undergrowth at speed, followed by a curse from the bank that was too shocked and too human to be mistaken for anything else. The dog had gone in. Of course he had. The soldier felt cold rage move through him even as relief hit right behind it, because he knew what it meant when the shepherd chose impact over warning. The threat had come within striking distance. The brush above the chute thrashed violently now. One shot fired wild into the canopy. Another into the riverbank. Then came the short ugly sound of a man being dragged off balance by something that refused to let go. The soldier did not waste the opening. He slammed the machete down again, felt the blade bite through the wet webbing, and the life jacket strap snapped free so suddenly the child nearly tore out of his grip and vanished into the basin. He caught her with both arms, shoved the machete into the branch tangle to free his hand, and turned his whole body sideways against the current. Too slow to climb out with her this way. Too exposed to stay. The chute downstream was death. The ledge above was their only chance. But the rope line was set for one man descending, not a wounded child, and a soldier fighting floodwater under fire. He needed another path. Then the child coughed hard against his chest, and whispered something so faint he almost thought the river had made the sound. "Mama!" The word hit him harder than the shots had. There are moments when danger narrows a man into pure action, and then there are moments when one tiny human sound breaks something open in the middle of that action and makes failure suddenly impossible. He tightened his grip around the child and looked toward the case again, just in time to see it slam hard against one of the rocks in the chute, roll half over, and split wider along the cracked seam. Gold bars glinted through the spray, heavy and obscene in that wild water, each one flashing bright against mud, blood, and river foam like proof that greed had built this whole nightmare long before dawn. The severed arm was still strapped across the lid, swollen pale skin turning with the current, fingers opening and closing faintly under the push of water, as if the dead still wanted to hold on. The soldier had seen bodies in rivers before. He had seen rivers carry men away in pieces before. But something about the gold changed the shape of it instantly. This was not a random smuggler's loss. This was cargo. Organized. Secured. Protected by an armed watcher on the bank. And somehow a child had ended up tied to the same current as it. Whatever this was, it ran deeper than one body and one rifle. Then the German shepherd barked again from above the bank, 3 short savage bursts in rapid sequence, and the soldier knew 2 things at once. First, the dog was still alive and mobile. Second, the shooter was no longer in control of the fight. The brush snapped violently to the right. A man shouted in pain. Something metallic hit rock and slid. The soldier risked one glance and caught a flash of it through the leaves. A rifle tumbling downslope toward the chute, one sling strap snagging briefly on a root before the whole weapon broke free and vanished into the white water. The German shepherd burst into view a split second later, black antennae coat slick with spray and mud, teeth sunk high into the attacker's forearm as both of them crashed against the bank just above the basin. The shooter was not some local drifter or starving thief. Even in chaos the soldier saw that much. Dark clothing built for movement. Compact chest rig under the soaked shirt. Boots too good for jungle wandering. The man tried to hammer his free fist into the dog's skull, but the shepherd only drove harder, dragging him down the slope inch by inch toward the rock shelf. For one bright brutal second the soldier almost let himself believe it was enough. Then a second figure stepped out of the brush farther upstream with a pistol already raised. That changed everything. The soldier dropped instantly, wrapping the child under him, as the first pistol round snapped over the basin and punched into the ledge behind. There were at least 2 of them. Maybe more. Which meant the armed man the dog had taken down was not the whole security line around the river. This place had been watched. Guarded. Maybe for hours. Maybe for days. The second attacker shouted something sharp in a language the soldier knew just well enough to understand the intent, if not every word. Kill the dog. Recover the case. Do not let anyone reach the road. The man fighting the shepherd on the slope answered with a scream instead of obedience, because the German shepherd had just shifted his bite and found deeper flesh. The pistol fired again. Rock dust burst near the soldier's face. The child convulsed once in his arms, not hit, thank God, but drowning in terror and cold. He needed cover. He needed height. He needed the dog clear. He needed all of it at once. And war had taught him long ago that when a man needs everything at once, he starts with the thing that keeps another heartbeat alive. He jammed one hand under the child's life jacket, the other into the branch pile, and forced both of them sideways behind the largest slab of rock at the basin edge, using the surge of the current to help rather than fight him. Water slammed them against stone hard enough to bruise. Better bruised than dead. The pistol shooter moved to get angle. The soldier could hear it in the brush, footwork quick and disciplined, trying to come lower toward the chute where the rock shield would fail. He looked up and saw the German shepherd release the first attacker only long enough to pivot toward the new threat. That pivot saved the dog's life. The pistol round cracked through the place where his ribs had been a fraction earlier and smashed into the slope instead. The shepherd launched uphill through mud and roots with the kind of committed violence only a dog defending his person can produce. The second man fired too fast on the retreat. Missed once. Hit a branch. Tried to step back and lost footing on wet clay. The dog hit him chest high, and both went down into the cane. The pistol flew loose, landed on a flat stone, bounced once, and dropped into the very edge of the basin where current seized it and slammed it out of reach. For the first time since the rifle bolt clicked, the soldier heard something better than gunfire. Panic. Real panic. The men in the brush had expected fear, not resistance. They had expected a trapped old soldier in the river, and maybe an easy body count after that. They had not expected the dog to break their first line in seconds, and tear the second one off balance before he could finish the basin kill. The soldier used the opening. He shoved the child higher against the rock shelf and found the rope line trailing from the root anchor above, still hanging within reach where floodwater had not dragged it free. Good. He looped it once under the life jacket straps and around the child's chest, nodding by pure muscle memory, while bullets were no longer the immediate language of the bank. The little body shook uncontrollably. Mud streaked her face. Her eyes were open now, huge and unfocused with cold and fear, but still alive enough to lock on his for one broken second. "Listen to me," he said, not because children in shock always can, but because voices sometimes hold more than meaning in moments like this. "You are not dying here." He yanked the rope twice hard, the old signal he used with the dog in work situations when immediate pull mattered more than nuance. Above him, from somewhere between the ledge and the fighting brush, the German shepherd barked once in answer. He had heard. He was still there. The soldier braced his boots against the submerged rock and hauled, using the current and the rope together to lever the child upward toward the ledge in jerking increments. Too slow. Everything felt too slow. But she moved. One foot. Then both shoulders. Then the life jacket rode over the lip of the basin rock, and the child slid half out of the water, coughing and clawing weakly at stone. A scream tore through the brush above, followed by the brutal wet sound of a man hitting rocks hard. The first attacker came tumbling down the bank, arm mauled, face shredded with mud and panic, one hand trying to hold his own blood inside him. He saw the soldier in the basin, saw the child almost free, and in that instant abandoned everything except one last desperate rush toward the case spinning in the chute. That told the soldier more than words would have. Not the child. Not his wounded partner. Not escape. The case came first. Gold came first. Whatever network this was, the cargo mattered more than flesh. The man lunged onto the slick stone near the chute, caught the rotting webbing strapped to the metal handle, and almost got it. Almost. Then the German shepherd hit him from the side, like a collapsing gate, all weight and fury and wet muscle, and the two of them crashed together directly into the edge of the current. The case tore free from the rock jam. For one insane instant man, dog, and gold were all in the same violent spin of white water. The soldier's heart stopped in his chest. Then the current chose. The case shot downstream into the chute and vanished. The wounded man went after it with a howl that ended in water. But the dog slammed sideways against a rock shelf just above the drop, claws scraping for purchase, body half in the current and half out of it. The soldier did not think. He let go of everything except the rope around the child and threw himself toward the dog. One hand caught harness. The other caught fur and skin and living weight. The current tried to take the shepherd out from under him, but the dog twisted toward the rock at the same time, and the combined pull bought them one impossible inch. Then another. The child lay on the ledge above them, coughing river water and sobbing in tiny shredded breaths. Somewhere in the brush, somebody else was running. Maybe a third man. Maybe the same fear moving through different legs. The jungle no longer sounded still at all. It sounded like retreat. Branches breaking. Someone shouting farther back from the trees. Whoever had owned the case had just lost it to the river, lost 2 armed men to blood and panic, and lost the clean kill they came for. The soldier hauled once more, and got the German shepherd high enough to lock both forelegs over rock. The dog clawed, twisted, and came free in a drenched, violent scramble, chest heaving, muzzle red with somebody else's blood. For half a second man and dog stayed pressed together against the stone, both breathing like the jungle was trying to reach inside and tear the air back out of them. Then the dog's head snapped up toward the far bank. Not at the fleeing men. At something higher. The soldier followed the line of his stare, and saw it at last through the dripping leaves above the chute, a crude wooden platform built into the trees, camouflaged under netting and vines, half hidden from the river unless a man stood in exactly the wrong place at exactly the right time. A lookout nest. No more than that. As the mist shifted, he saw stacked fuel cans, tarp-wrapped crates, radio wire running up the trunk, and one dark trail cut into the brush behind it leading deeper into the jungle. This was not a random ambush point. It was a river post. A transfer point. Maybe a camp not far beyond. And if there had been one child in the water tied to that gold, there could be more. The German shepherd gave a low growl that rolled straight into the soldier's bones. On the ledge beside them, the child dragged in one shattered breath and whispered 2 words through chattering teeth. There were! She coughed hard enough to fold in on herself, then forced the rest out anyway. More kids! The soldier did not ask the child to repeat it. He did not need to. 2 words were enough to change the river, the gold, the severed arm, the hidden gunman, even the jungle itself. More kids. The meaning spread through him cold and fast, sharper than fear because fear still leaves room for self-preservation, and this did not. This was something worse. This was the instant a man understands he has not stumbled into one crime, but into a system built to keep committing them. The child shook violently on the ledge, coughing river water and trying to breathe through shock, while the German shepherd stood over both of them with blood on his muzzle, chest heaving, ears high, still facing the tree line where the camouflaged platform sat hidden behind leaves and rain-heavy vine. The river roared below like nothing had changed. Somewhere downstream, the gold case was already being swallowed by distance and white water. Somewhere in the brush, at least one surviving gunman was retreating. And somewhere deeper in the jungle, if the child's broken whisper was true, there were others still alive under the control of whoever had built that river post. The soldier felt the old war in him rise without permission. Not the glory men lie about afterward. The cold hard part. The part that counts exits, threats, numbers, distance, and time before emotion gets a vote. He got the child farther from the basin first. That came before everything, even pursuit. He hooked one arm under her life jacket, took the rope with his free hand, and pulled her higher up the rock shelf while the German shepherd moved in a tight protective circle around them, nose working, body tense, every few seconds cutting his stare back toward the hidden platform in the trees. The child was lighter than she should have been, all shivering bones and soaked clothes, with bruises already blooming dark along one arm where the current or the restraints had slammed her into something harder than water. 7, maybe 8 years old. No older. Her lips trembled blue at the edges. Mud streaked her cheeks. Terror lived in her eyes so deeply it looked less like fear and more like something burned into the body by repetition. Not one bad morning. Many. The soldier had seen that look before too, though not on children this small. Prisoners. Civilians found too late. Young recruits after their first ambush. The dog pressed close once, letting the child clutch a handful of wet fur without thinking, and the moment her fingers touched him, a tiny fraction of the panic left her face. Not gone. Nothing like that goes quickly, but reduced enough for her to breathe one full breath without choking on it. The soldier noticed it instantly. Animals sometimes accomplish in 1 second what voices cannot do in 10 minutes. He stripped off his outer shirt, wrapped it around her shoulders as tightly as he could, and looked once toward the jungle trail behind them. Cabin road, help, radio. The safe answer stood in that direction. The child's words made it impossible. "Listen to me," he said, keeping his voice low and hard and simple, the way he used to speak to terrified young soldiers who needed instructions more than comfort. "Are there more children back there?" The girl stared at him with teeth chattering so violently she could barely force sound through them. She nodded once. Then again, harder, as if afraid he might not believe her. "How many?" She swallowed, coughed, and dragged in a shaking breath. "I don't know." Tears mixed with river water on her dirty face. "A lot." The soldier closed his eyes for one dead second. Not in despair. In control. You close your eyes when rage arrives too fast, and you need one heartbeat to chain it down before it makes you stupid. The German shepherd growled low toward the platform again, and the soldier followed the sound with his gaze. The hidden structure was real. Crates under tarp. Fuel cans. Wire. A cut path leading deeper inland. This had not been built overnight. Men had worked here. Men had guarded here. Men had moved cargo, gold, and children through this river channel under enough secrecy to kill anyone who found it. The wounded gunman who chased the case downstream might still be alive. The second attacker could still be in the brush, bleeding and armed with whatever backup weapon he carried. And if there were more children, there would be more men beyond that platform. Rationally, the soldier knew exactly what he should do. Get the child out. Reach the cabin. Call the police, military, whoever still answered these forests with helicopters and rifles and paperwork. Let professionals come in force. But rational answers have a weakness in places like this. They assume time belongs to the innocent. He looked at the child again, and saw the answer waiting there. Not in her face. In the marks on her wrists. Then, dark abrasions under the mud, half hidden where black webbing had bitten skin long enough to leave a story. She had not fallen into the river by chance. She had escaped and been thrown in, or been dragged toward the water with the cargo and lost in the transfer. Either way, whoever ran the camp already knew something had gone wrong. Gunfire. Missing gold. Missing child. Dead or wounded guards. By the time outside help came through jungle roads and bad communications, those other children could be gone. Moved upriver. Moved by truck. Buried. He knew these systems. Not this exact one, not here, not now, but crime, trafficking, hidden operations, they all behave the same once exposed. They burn records. They move product. They erase witnesses. If he walked away cleanly, he might save one child and lose every other soul hidden beyond that platform. The German shepherd turned and looked directly at him then, and in that look was the same terrible recognition. The dog knew they were not done. He could smell people, fuel, gun oil, fear, blood, and the deep stale human density that does not belong in untouched jungle unless many bodies have been kept in one place too long. The soldier made the decision in silence, because important decisions often arrive fully formed long before words could help them. He crouched close to the child and spoke with the same hard simplicity. "Can you hide?" She blinked at him, not understanding at first. He pointed toward a narrow crack behind the rock shelf where roots and hanging moss formed a dark pocket above floodline. The dog nosed that way instantly, confirming what the soldier hoped, that the space was concealed from the river and from the platform unless someone climbed the ledge and searched by hand. "Stay there. Do not move unless you hear my voice or the dog comes for you. Understand?" Her eyes widened in fresh fear because children know when adults are about to go somewhere dangerous without them. She grabbed his wrist with both hands, shock making her strength feel stronger than it was. "Don't go there," she whispered. "They hurt them." "Not hurt us. Hurt them." The soldier felt the words go through him like a blade dragged slowly. He covered her hands with his own and held them there just long enough to make the promise believable. "I'm coming back." Men say that line too easily in stories. He did not. He said it like an oath and hated how much it sounded like one. Then he guided her into the root hollow, wrapped the damp shirt tighter around her, and left his canteen in her lap. The German shepherd licked once across the child's muddy knuckles before stepping back toward the ledge. "Ready?" The soldier recovered what he could in seconds. Machete from the basin branches. Pack from the upper shelf. Spare cord. Small field flashlight. 2 magazines for the old sidearm he kept wrapped in oilcloth deep in the pack because forests teach men that authorities do not always arrive first. The pistol felt heavier than usual in his hand, less from weight than from meaning. Carrying a weapon into hidden jungle infrastructure with one child already found alive meant this was no longer an accidental rescue. It was an incursion. He checked the chamber, kept it low, and turned to the dog. The German shepherd stood poised at the start of the cut path leading from the river post into the trees, blood drying dark along the muzzle, and one shoulder beginning to stiffen from the fight. Age showed in the first steps after stillness now, just a little. But purpose burned it off fast. The soldier crouched long enough to put one hand briefly against the dog's neck. "Quiet now," he said. Not because the dog needed the command to understand stealth, because saying it aloud steadied the man saying it. The shepherd answered by lowering his body and moving into the undergrowth like a shadow given muscle. The path behind the river platform was worse than a real trail because it had been made by men trying not to leave one. Brush had been cut low and rough, then allowed to grow partly back over the route. Mud had been tamped, not cleared. Broken branches bent inward rather than outward, hiding the line from casual eyes, but not from anyone trained to read passage. The soldier moved with the patience he had not needed in the basin. Every few steps he stopped, listened, and let the dog range ahead just far enough to sit without vanishing. The forest closed over them fast. Light thinned under the canopy until morning became a gray-green smear between leaves. The air smelled richer here, less open river and more rot, fungus, damp bark, and something else beneath it that made his mouth go hard. Fuel? Human waste. Too many people kept too long in one hidden place. Once he found cigarette butts pressed into the mud and covered with leaves. Once he found a strip of torn plastic from some commercial rice sack. Then came the first footprint clear enough to matter, deep boot tread, fresh, heading inward at speed. One of the surviving guards. Running back to warn the others. The soldier touched the print once, then rose without comment. The dog did not need one. He was already pulling slightly left, following the fresh ascent line through the wet green dark. They found the first body less than 200 yards in. Not the shooter who lost the case downstream. Another man. He lay crumpled against the base of a kapok tree with his throat open from jaw to collar by something narrow and clean. Knife, not machete. Recently done. blood still wet enough for flies not to have fully claimed it. No dog had done this. No animal from the jungle either. The man wore the same kind of hard-wearing dark field clothes as the river guards, one pocket turned inside out, as if someone had searched him fast. Around one wrist was a cheap radio handset smashed under a boot heel. The soldier did not need imagination to understand the sequence. One survivor from the river had run back to the camp. Someone inside had already started cleaning the mess. Whether that someone was the commander, another guard, or a rival inside the operation didn't matter yet. What mattered was speed. A system killing its own wounded before dawn was already in evacuation mode or internal collapse. The German shepherd sniffed once at the dead man, then moved on without interest. Good. The dead were not the threat. Living men with disappearing plans were. The soldier checked the body anyway and found one useful thing: a laminated tag on a cord tucked inside the shirt, printed with a river grid and a code number rather than a name. Organized. Professional enough to number routes. Whatever this place was, it had lasted longer than a makeshift kidnapping pit. The jungle thinned suddenly after that, not into openness but into order. The soldiers saw cut bamboo stakes first, then woven screens covered in vines. Then the faint straight line of corrugated roofing glimpsed through leaves where no roof should have existed. He dropped it once, and the dog flattened beside him. Ahead, through a screen of broadleaf plants, the hidden camp finally revealed itself in fragments. 3 low structures on raised posts. A larger storage shed near a clearing churned into mud by repeated traffic. A radio mast disguised inside a dead tree trunk. Fuel drums under tarps. 2 boats overturned beside a narrow drainage run leading back toward the river. And on the far side, behind a fence made less to keep people out than to keep something in, sat a long cage-like shelter built from timber slats and wire. The soldier did not hear the children first. He heard silence where children should have been making noise. That was worse. Then came one muffled cough. Then another. Then the dog gave a sound he almost never made, soft, deep, wounded in a way that had nothing to do with his own injuries. The soldier looked harder through the leaves. Small hands curled through the slats. A face. Another. Then one more. Children. Many of them. All packed into the long shelter in the mud, while armed men ran through the camp loading crates toward the boats. The soldier's heartbeat went slow then, not fast. Fast hearts are for panic. Slow hearts are for killing or rescuing, and both require accuracy. He counted 4 armed men immediately. Maybe more inside the buildings. One man barking orders near the boats, taller than the others, clean posture even in jungle grime, pistol at the hip, radio in hand. Leader. 2 others hauling crates, too heavy to be food, too careful to be cheap supplies. Gold? Weapons. Documents? Another guard dragging one limping captive by the arm toward the cage line, not a child this time, but a teenage boy with one side of the face swollen shut. The camp was moving, yes, but not yet gone. That meant the river failure had reached them fast, but not fast enough for total evacuation. There was still time to break something open. Not much. Enough. The soldier's mind built the map automatically. Boat lane. Fuel drums. Radio mast. Cage shelter. Leader near the waterline. Hidden approach from the left through banana brush. The German shepherd's stare remained fixed on the children, then shifted to the leader, then back to the soldier. Waiting. Ready. One command away from turning the whole camp sideways. The soldier felt the old guilt from the river crossing years ago rise once more, voices too late, children this time instead of soldiers. A chance to stop one evil before it vanished deeper into the jungle. He set a hand on the dog's shoulder and breathed once through his nose. Then, from inside the cage shelter, one tiny voice floated through the slats and the wet heat, too weak to be called crying anymore. "Please!" The word hit him harder than the rifle bolt had. Not because it was loud, but because it was so small. "Please." One child's voice, thin with fear and exhaustion, drifting through wire and timber in a clearing built to make people disappear. The retired soldier stayed low in the wet brush and let the full layout of the camp settle into his mind before he moved a single inch. 4 armed men in sight, maybe 6 total if the buildings held more. The tall one by the boats was clearly in charge, not because he shouted the most, but because everyone else moved faster whenever he turned his head. 1 guard near the cage line. 2 hauling crates toward the water. 1 limping man being dragged, older than the children, but too weak to fight back. Fuel drum stacked under tarp beside the storage shed. Radio mast disguised inside the stripped tree trunk. Boats ready for fast river movement. Evacuation then. They knew the river post had been compromised. Maybe they did not know exactly how badly, but they knew enough to burn time and lives getting the operation off the ground. The German shepherd remained motionless beside him, chest low to the mud, eyes moving from the children to the leader and back again, waiting for direction the way only a dog who trusts his person completely can wait. The soldier breathed once, slow and controlled, while old jungle instincts took over what fear could have ruined. He could not storm the clearing cleanly. Too many children packed into one place. Too many moving angles. Too much chance of one frightened gunman firing into the cage just to keep control. He needed shock, noise, confusion, and one clean break point. Then his eyes settled on the fuel drums, and the plan arrived whole. He backed out 3 paces, keeping low, and circled left through banana brush and broad wet leaves until he could see the drums from a narrower angle near the edge of the boat lane. Close enough now to smell raw fuel through the mud and human sweat. Closer too to the children. He heard them better from here, not crying openly, but breathing in the frightened uneven rhythm of bodies that had learned noise brings punishment. At least 8, maybe 10, maybe more packed into that slatted shelter. Some too quiet. One child coughed with the deep tearing sound of a fever already settling into the chest. Another whispered something too soft to catch. The teenage boy by the fence line stumbled and went to one knee. The guard dragging him kicked him in the ribs without slowing. The dog's lips tightened just enough to show white. The soldier touched one finger lightly to the ground between them. Hold. Not yet. Above the clearing, the mist was lifting in slow gray threads, letting more of the morning light leak down through the canopy, which made the camp look worse instead of clearer. Nothing hidden in full dark ever looks as evil as it does when daylight begins touching it, and it still does not belong to the world. The leader by the boat snapped an order, and one of the crate men broke away toward the storage shed. Wrong move. Men under pressure make decisions that expose their weak side, and this one had just opened the line between the fuel, the shed, and the cage. The soldier drew the pistol, checked his angle once, and fired into the nearest fuel drum. The first round punched metal. The second hit low and tore a spraying line of fuel across the mud under the tarp stack. The third struck sparks off the shed brace where somebody had left a lantern burning in the panic of the evacuation. Flame ran at once. Not an explosion. Not yet. Just a long savage whoosh as fire found the vapor line and turned it into instant chaos. Men shouted. One dropped a crate and the lid burst open in the mud, spilling wrapped metal bars that flashed yellow through the firelight and confirmed what the river had already told him. Gold. The leader spun toward the left brush and drew fast. Too fast for a smuggler, too calm for a panicked trafficker. Trained. The guard at the cage line abandoned the teenage boy and started raising his weapon toward the same patch of jungle the soldier had just fired from. That was the break point. Go, the soldier said, and the German shepherd launched out of the brush like something the camp should have feared long before it ever arrived. He did not go for the nearest man. He went for the one at the cage. Smart dog. Always the smart dog first. The German shepherd hit the guard chest high before the weapon fully settled, driving him backward into the slatted wall hard enough to rattle the whole shelter and send terrified children screaming inside. The gun fired wild into the roof. Splinters fell. The teenage boy dropped flat in the mud. The leader shot once toward the dog and missed because the soldier's next round found the boat motor casing inches from his hand and blew metal fragments across his forearm. The clearing erupted. One crate man ran toward the burning fuel line with a tarp, then saw it was already too late and reversed toward the boats. The other drew a short carbine from under the fallen crate and started spraying blindly into the left side brush. The soldier changed position after every shot, moving fast and low through the wet plants, letting the jungle keep swallowing him between muzzle flashes. He fired once at the radio mast, severing the visible line running from the dead tree trunk into the shed wall. Fired again at the second boat's fuel can, not to blow it, but to make them think every object in the camp had become a target. Confusion spread exactly the way he needed it to. Men stopped protecting the children and started protecting their escape routes. Fire climbed the tarp stack and rolled under the shed overhang. Smoke thickened. Someone shouted that the river post was lost. Someone else screamed back that the package still had to move. Package? Not children. Not people. Package? That word told him enough about the shape of the men he was fighting. The dog had his man on the ground now, teeth deep into the weapon arm, while the guard hammered uselessly at his head and neck with a free hand. The cage door, chained and locked from the outside, sat less than 3 feet beyond them. The soldier broke from cover and sprinted the gap before any of the others understood what he was doing. A carbine round clipped bark from the tree just behind his head. Another cut through broad leaves to his right. He hit the cage line low, drove his shoulder into the slats beside the dog and the down guard, and smashed the butt of the pistol into the man's temple once, twice, until the arm stopped fighting under the shepherd's bite. The children inside had all retreated to the back wall, except one little girl at the front, who had both hands over her ears and eyes fixed on the dog as if he were the first good thing she had seen in days. The chain around the door was thick, but the lock was cheap, built for prisoners too weak and too scared to test it. The soldier jammed the muzzle through the link gap and fired. Metal burst. The chain dropped. "Back!" he shouted to the children, then yanked the door wide as another bullet slammed into the timber post above his shoulder and showered him in splinters. "Out! Run to the trees on the left! Stay low!" The first children did not move. Of course they didn't. Kids held in cages do not trust the first open door. Then the teenage boy dragged himself up from the mud, one side of his face swollen and split, and screamed at them with the raw, desperate authority of someone who had been waiting too long for exactly this moment. "Go!" That broke it. They came out all at once. Small bodies. Bare feet. Torn shirts. Hollow faces. Too many ribs. Terror and hope colliding in one violent scramble through mud and smoke. The soldier shoved the smallest toward the left brush line and counted as fast as they passed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then one child fell hard at the threshold and did not get up. A boy, maybe 5, maybe younger, too light, eyes half rolled, fever-bright skin under dirt. The soldier scooped him with one arm just as the leader by the boats opened fire again, no longer trying to preserve order, only trying to stop loss. The rounds came low this time, aimed at fleeing children. That switched the whole thing from ugly operation to slaughter in one heartbeat, and the soldier felt something inside him go cold enough to become perfectly steady. He put the small boy behind the cage wall, rose into a kneeling angle, and shot the leader twice. Once in the thigh. Once through the shoulder that held the pistol. Not dead. Worse. Disabled. The man folded into the mud beside the half-loaded boat and screamed orders no one obeyed anymore. The crate man with the carbine broke toward the river with one arm full of gold instead of helping his leader. The other tried to pull the wounded guard free of the dog and lost half his sleeve to the German shepherd's red jaws for the effort. Fire from the fuel stack spread to the edge of the shed roof, and black smoke began rolling across the clearing. The jungle was taking the camp back even while the people inside it were still trying to decide whether to flee, fight, or save their cargo. Then came the sound the soldier had feared since the child whispered there were more. A heavy door slamming open from inside the larger rear building. Not the cage shelter. Something bigger. Hidden. He turned just in time to see a woman stumble out into the smoke carrying a toddler against her chest, another child clinging to her back by a length of cloth tied across her shoulders. She was not one of the guards. She was thin to the point of collapse, hair hacked unevenly short, face hollow, wrists marked dark with old restrained bruises. Behind her, in the doorway she had just burst from, two more children stood blinded by the sudden daylight and smoke, not understanding yet that the gunfire outside was the shape of a chance. The woman saw the open cage, the running children, the dog, the armed old soldier in the mud, and made the kind of decision only desperation can make. She shoved the toddler into the arms of the nearest older child, and screamed one word toward the building behind her. "Run!" The interior answered with crying. More children. Hidden in the rear structure all along. The camp had been bigger than the clearing showed. Worse than the river revealed. The German shepherd heard them too, and gave one enormous bark that cut across gunfire, fire, shouting, and panic like an order from the earth itself. Run. The soldier moved for the rear building because there was no other choice left. The dog, blood-streaked and wild-eyed with purpose, tore free of the guard and pivoted with him. The woman with the hacked hair caught one child, shoved another toward the brush, then looked straight at the soldier with a face emptied of everything except one last demand that did not need language. Take them out. He almost reached the doorway before the hidden last man stepped from the smoke inside, with a shotgun leveled at chest height. Not panicked. Not confused. Waiting. This one had stayed in reserve while the others scrambled. Older than the rest. Heavier. Eyes dead in the way only practiced men's eyes go dead, when they have already accepted what they are about to do. The soldier turned hard, trying to throw his body between the barrel and the children spilling from the doorway, but there was no time, no clean angle, no distance left to work with. The shotgun came up. The man smiled once through the smoke, and then the German shepherd jumped straight into the blast line. The shotgun roared so close the jungle seemed to split open with it. The old soldier saw the flash, saw the German shepherd in the air between the muzzle and the children, saw smoke, splintered wood, and a spray of dirt kick off the doorway post all in the same impossible second, but he did not see the dog fall. He heard him hit. Heavy. Hard. Alive. That mattered more than anything. The shotgun blast had gone wide enough because the shepherd hit the man high in the chest before the barrel fully settled, turning what should have been a killing shot into a savage scatter of pellets that shredded the doorframe, tore bark from a nearby trunk, and sent two children screaming into the mud instead of sending them dead at the threshold. The reserve guard staggered backward under the impact, one boot slipping on the wet planks, the shotgun jerking up and away as the German shepherd crashed into him with all the desperate violence left in his body. They went down together inside the doorway where smoke was thickest. The soldier moved on reflex older than thought. He fired once, into the ceiling beam, just above the man's head, not to hit the dog in that tangle, but to stun the guard into flinching long enough for the shepherd to take control. The tactic worked. The man threw one arm over his face against the blast of splinter and dust, and the dog's jaws found the wrist holding the shotgun. The weapon hit the floorboards. The soldier kicked it sideways into the fire-black interior, just as more children burst from the building behind them, small shadows coughing and stumbling into a clearing that had become too chaotic to understand in any single glance. The woman with the shaved, hacked hair was dragging two children toward the left brush, while an older girl tried to carry the toddler and half-led, half-pulled another little boy whose legs barely seemed to know how to run. The caged children were already disappearing into the banana growth and low ferns where the soldier had directed them, but not fast enough, not clean enough, because panic scatters people badly and children fresh from captivity do not move like a trained group escaping danger. One of the crate men tried to cut them off from the riverside, carbine up, gold abandoned in the mud at his boots now that the camp itself was breaking apart around him. The soldier pivoted and dropped him with a shot through the thigh that spun him hard into the fuel drum stack where fire had now climbed fully into the tarp and was beginning to feed on the wooden side of the storage shed. The man's scream tore through the clearing. Good. Pain can be useful when it makes the cruel forget their aim. The limping guard, who had been mauled at the cage line, was crawling now, trying to reach the leader by the boats, leaving a dark drag of blood through the mud. The leader himself had managed to prop up on one elbow despite the leg wound, and was fumbling for a second sidearm tucked at the back of his waistband. The soldier saw it, calculated, and fired once more. The shot hit the boat hull inches from the man's hand, and blew river water, and splintered wood over his face. Close enough. He needed the leader afraid, and pinned for 3 more seconds, not dead yet. Dead men tell less. Inside the rear building, the reserve guard was still fighting the German shepherd with the thick, ugly strength of a man who knows losing means prison or worse. The soldier heard furniture overturn, a body slam into planks, the low, murderous snarl of the dog, and then the man's hand found something metal and loose on the floor. A machete. The soldier lunged through the doorway just as the blade came up wild in the smoke. He caught the man's wrist with both hands and slammed it against the wall so hard the knuckles split open on impact. The German shepherd shifted his bite higher and drove the man backward into a support post. The machete dropped. The guard tried to knee the dog in the ribs. The dog held. The soldier rammed the pistol hard under the man's jaw. "Down!" he said, voice flat as river stone. The man spat blood and tried to say something through broken breath, some curse or bargain swallowed by pain and smoke. Then the dog twisted once more, and the fight left him all at once. He sagged to the floorboards with the shepherd still locked on his arm. Not dead, not moving well enough to matter. The interior of the building revealed itself in flashes, as the soldier's eyes adjusted to smoke and broken light. Mats on the floor. Chains fixed to one beam. Plastic water drums half empty. Moldy sacks of rice. Children's clothing in a pile near the back wall. Too many sizes. Too many. It was not a holding room built for one transfer. It was a warehouse for lives. A tiny whimper came from the rear corner and cut through everything else. The soldier turned and found another child huddled behind an overturned cot frame, too frightened to move even now that escape had started. A girl this time, maybe 4, maybe younger, skeletal arms wrapped over her own head, as if she had learned that when shouting and boots come, the only thing left to do is disappear inside yourself. He holstered the pistol long enough to crouch and pull her free, and the moment he touched her she recoiled so violently that for one fraction of a second his whole chest caved inward with the force of what that movement meant. The German shepherd saw it too. He released the guard only when the soldier gave the word, then limped close and lowered his head to the child's level without a sound. The little girl froze, then stared. Fear did not vanish, but it changed shape. Her hands reached first, not for the soldier, but for the dog's neck fur. The shepherd stood absolutely still and let her cling. "Good," the soldier murmured, more to keep his own body under control than because the child needed instruction. He scooped her up against one shoulder and stepped back into the clearing where the whole operation had shifted again. Fire had reached the boatside brush and smoke was flattening low over the camp. The woman with the hacked hair had gathered 5 of the children near the left escape line, but 3 more were still in the open, scattered between the cage and the larger building, too confused by noise and flame to choose a direction. The teenage boy was trying to herd them, and nearly succeeded until the wounded leader finally got his second sidearm free and raised it toward the cluster. The soldier fired first. Not at the leader's chest. At the wrist. The pistol flew from the man's hand in a burst of blood and mud. The leader rolled, screaming, and the older woman did not hesitate. She ran straight at him with nothing in her hands but a broken length of chain ripped from the building wall, and brought it down across his face with such force that even the children stopped moving for half a second. Again. Again. Not wild. Not hysterical. Deliberate. Years of helplessness compressed into 3 brutal blows. The soldier did not stop her. Some debts belong to the law. Some belong elsewhere. He only shouted for the children to the brush again, and this time they moved, because now the camp no longer felt like a prison cracking open. It felt like something dying. The German shepherd surged ahead of the nearest straggler and physically blocked the path away from the escape line, turning the terrified child back toward the left side cover with one bark and a shoulder nudge. Even limping, even bloodied, even after taking the blast line meant for strangers, he was still doing the work. Then the jumble answered with a sound none of them wanted to hear. Engines. Faint at first through canopy and smoke, then clearer. Not boats. Trucks. More than one. Somewhere beyond the far tree line behind the camp, a dirt track or hidden service road ran close enough for vehicles to reach this place, and whoever had not yet heard the river gunfire had heard the radio chaos before the mass line got cut. Reinforcements. Or extraction. Either way, the window had just narrowed from terrible to almost gone. The soldier turned to the woman and spoke the simplest question possible. "Road?" She nodded immediately, breath tearing in and out of her chest, one hand still gripping the broken chain. "Back ridge." "Trucks." Her accent was local but scarred by years of fear, words rushing now that she could use them toward escape instead of obedience. "They take children there. Then move at night." She pointed through the rear brush behind the bigger building. "There is another path. High ground. Not road." "Good. A chance. Maybe." The soldier shoved the little girl gently into the woman's arms and started counting heads through the smoke and movement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Including the child from the river, if she was still hidden on the ledge where he left her, that made 12. Maybe more missing. Maybe dead. No time to search every dark corner now, not with trucks coming. The German shepherd returned to his side exactly then, muzzle dark with blood, left shoulder peppered, and wet where the shotgun scatter had bitten fur and skin more than he wanted to see. The dog stood. That was enough for now. The soldier touched the harness once. "With me!" They moved the children out the back fast, using the woman and the teenage boy as runners, while the soldier covered the rear and the dog checked flanks. The hidden trail behind the camp climbed sharply through slick roots and low-hanging vines toward the ridge she had mentioned, narrow enough that the children had to move single file, which was good for speed and bad for panic. The toddler cried once, and the woman clamped a hand gently over the little mouth before sound could travel farther. Behind them, the first truck engine cut hard and doors slammed. Men shouted. Someone in the camp fired twice, not at a visible target, just to pin the jungle and remind the frightened that authority was still armed. The soldier almost sent the group onward without going back for the river child. Almost. But promises made to children in floodwater become part of a man's bones, whether he likes it or not. He stopped the line in a dense patch of cane just below the ridge crest, and put the woman in charge with one sentence that told her exactly who he was without needing history. "If I don't come back in 5 minutes, keep moving east until the river splits and hide." She looked at him once, saw that he meant it, then grabbed his forearm with dirty fingers and said, "There are cages farther north too." The words landed like another rifle shot. Not one camp. A network. A route. More posts. More children. Of course. The jungle had never hidden one evil here. It had hidden many. He nodded once because there was nothing else worth saying yet, and then he turned downhill with the German shepherd already moving beside him. Going back into a collapsing crime scene with armed reinforcements arriving would have been suicide if his reason had been cargo or vengeance. Going back for one small child hidden above the basin was something else entirely. The soldier and the dog moved faster now, because the camp no longer needed stealth as much as the ledge needed speed. Men were shouting behind them, spreading through the structures, finding the dead and wounded, understanding in bursts what had been lost. One voice rose above the others in pure terror when it discovered the boats, still burning low on the far side, and the gold crate gone to the river. Good. Let fear work for them. The soldier crossed the edge of the clearing at a run, past the first body he had dropped near the fuel drums, and cut hard toward the side path leading back to the basin. 2 new men came up from the river road too late, one with a rifle, one with a radio, both trying to orient in smoke and confusion. The German shepherd never gave them that chance. He hit the radio man first, low behind the knee, sending him face first into mud and roots. The soldier fired past them both into the rifleman's shoulder before the barrel fully turned. Then he kept running. Every second spent there now was a second stolen from the child on the ledge. They reached the basin shelf with the river still raging, and the mist finally burning off into hard morning light. The root hollow where he had hidden her was empty for one terrifying instant that hollowed his chest clean out. Then he heard the cough from 3 feet to the right. She had crawled out on her own, wrapped in his soaked shirt, trying with all the failing strength in her little body to get closer to the sound of people. The moment she saw the dog, what remained of her control collapsed, and she started sobbing without voice, shoulders shaking more than sound coming out. The soldier dropped to one knee, scooped her up, and turned just as movement flickered through the trees above the shelf. One of the reinforcement men had followed faster than expected. No clean shot. Too much brush. But he had them marked now. The soldier fired once to keep the head down and sprinted for the ridge trail with the river child against his chest, and the German shepherd running slightly behind, still guarding the rear despite blood loss, exhaustion, and the shotgun wound he should never have had to carry at all. They made the lower slope just as bullets started clipping leaves above them. The dog barked once, hard, urgent, right-side warning, and the soldier cut left without thought. A round tore through the vine curtain where his face had been. Good dog. Always the good dog. When they broke back into the cane thicket below the ridge, the children were still there. The woman had done exactly what fear makes the strong do when given one clean job, held the line together through terror. 11 faces turned toward him at once, then 12 when he stepped in with the river child alive in his arms. For one brief impossible second, relief moved through that patch of jungle like light through water. Not safety. Not yet. But proof. Proof that someone had gone back and come back. The little one saw the dog first, as children often do when the world has gone too monstrous to trust adults on sight, and the German shepherd stood among them muddy, bleeding, and fierce as a war story made flesh. The soldier handed the child to the older woman, and finally let himself look fully at the dog's shoulder. The shotgun had done more damage than he wanted to admit. For blasted away. Skin furrowed and leaking steadily. Not a clean deep entry, but enough to punish movement with every step. The shepherd met his eyes anyway, ears up, body forward, asking only the one question that mattered now. Where next? Then, from beyond the ridge, came the sound of men spreading through the lower jungle in multiple directions, and one shouted order that made every adult there understand at once how thin their time had become. Take the dogs first. The old man alive. There was only one dog, which meant somebody below had already learned exactly who was breaking their camps open. And as the soldier looked east toward the split river route the woman had named, he realized the worst truth yet. They were no longer just escaping one camp. They were carrying living evidence through a jungle full of men who now knew precisely what had been taken from them. The moment the order floated up through the trees, the jungle stopped feeling like cover and started feeling like a net. Take the dog first. The old man alive. That was not the shout of men improvising in panic. That was command language. Clear priority. Clear target. It meant whoever ran the river camps already understood three things. The children were proof, the soldier was now a witness, and the German shepherd was the force multiplier turning impossible escapes into real ones. Kill the dog, capture the man, recover what you can, erase the rest. The retired soldier let that truth settle for exactly one breath before he started moving the group again, because fear is useful only if it sharpens the next decision. The older woman shifted the rescued river child to one hip and immediately took point with the older kids. Good. She still knew these routes better than he did. The teenage boy, face swollen and half blind on one side, gathered the smallest children inward with the fierce protective urgency of someone who had already been turned into an adult by horror long before his body agreed to it. The German shepherd positioned himself not at the front, but along the rear left edge where scent and sound from the lower jungle could reach him first. Smarter. The old soldier kept the pistol low and the machete loose in his other hand and sent them east through the cane. The ridge path was barely a path at all, more the memory of one hidden under wet growth, but it gave them height, and that gave them one brief advantage. Below, trucks and armed men had the lower roads and river lanes. Up here the jungle narrowed movement into single-file lines, muddy shelf crossings, and root tangles too tight for engines and too loud for fast pursuit. But height brings its own cruelty. The slope pulled at the children's legs. Wet clay turned footholds into lies. Little feet slipped. Tiny lungs still broken by hunger, and fear had to drag air through hard climbs. Twice a child fell, and had to be lifted. Once the toddler cried out, and every adult body in the line went rigid until the older woman got the little face buried against her neck again. The old soldier counted constantly without seeming to. 12 children now. Plus the woman. Plus the teenage boy. 15 souls. Too many to move silently. Too many to move quickly. Not enough to leave any behind. The German shepherd paused once, head lifting toward the lower slope, and gave one low rumbling sound that meant movement parallel to them, not behind. Flankers. The armed men were splitting the chase line, trying to run the ridge from both sides like hunters pushing boar toward a waiting gun. The soldier cut the group off the main ridge at once and pushed them into a deep seam between moss-black boulders where giant roots had split the earth into a hidden trench. It smelled of old water and leaf rot and the cool mineral damp that lingers where sunlight almost never reaches. Good concealment. Bad speed. But speed was already gone. He crouched in the narrow space and listened. The children huddled shoulder to shoulder, too frightened even to whisper now, while the German shepherd stood at the trench mouth with every muscle locked. The old soldier heard the lower search line first, boots slipping on wet slope, branches being knocked aside instead of carefully moved, one man swearing softly in frustration. Hired muscle, then? Not all of them were jungle smart. That helped. Then, he heard something worse from farther upslope. Silence where a man should have made sound. The kind of careful approach that comes from someone trained enough to hunt in green terrain without announcing it. The leader maybe. Or another one like him. The soldier slid one hand to the dog's shoulder without looking, and felt heat there from the wound. Too much heat. The shotgun scrape was getting angrier, and the shepherd's breathing, though controlled, had deepened into the heavier rhythm of a body spending blood it could not spare. Not now, he thought uselessly. Not now. The dog answered by leaning once into the touch and keeping his eyes on the jungle ahead. Always work first. A shout came from below then, sudden and close. Someone had found the river child's footprint, where the little shoes had dragged in the mud on the return climb. Another voice answered from the right flank. They were triangulating. The soldier looked at the older woman and saw that she already knew it too. There was no panic in her face now, only that hard stripped expression of someone who has lived long enough under control to become brutally practical when chance finally appears. "Water split," he whispered. She nodded toward the east, then drew two lines in the mud with a broken stick. "Main river drops south. Small branch cuts north through stone. There is a cave shelf there, hidden from above. We hid supplies once." Once. The word carried history. Escape plans. Failed tries. People who maybe made it that far and maybe didn't. The soldier understood the shape of the choice immediately. Keep pushing straight east and risk getting overrun in open ridge brush. Or angle for the stone branch and take shelter long enough to reset, patch wounds, and decide how to move 12 children through a jungle full of armed men who now had trucks, radios, and a reason to burn the entire forest behind them. Shelter won. But they needed one more minute than the pursuers could allow them. Which meant somebody had to buy it. He almost said he would do it alone. Almost. Then he looked at the German shepherd and knew the thought was a lie before it even formed fully. There was no version of this where the dog let him walk back toward the gunman by himself. More than that, there was no version where one old man with a pistol could stall a tightening search ring without the shepherd's ears, nose, and explosive first contact. That truth tasted bitter because the dog was already wounded. But bitter truths are still truths. The soldier handed the woman the spare magazine and a small folding knife from his pack. "Take them to the stone branch," he said. "If you hear shooting, keep moving." The teenage boy stiffened immediately. "I'm staying." Of course he was. The soldier almost shut him down by reflex, then saw the rage under the swelling, the raw courage, the absolute refusal to crawl away while someone else stood between him and the thing that had owned him. 15 years old maybe less, and already carrying the eyes of someone who had watched too much evil survive the night. "No," the soldier said, because bravery in the wrong place is just another way predators get children killed. "You keep them together. That's the job." The boy hated it. Good. Jobs worth doing are rarely the ones people want. The older woman did not argue. She only gripped the soldier's forearm once, hard, and whispered, "There is a ravine bend after the stone branch. If we reach it, they lose vehicles." Then she was moving the children deeper through the root trench, the teenage boy behind them, counting small hands, small heads, small breaths. The old soldier waited until the last child passed, then nodded once to the German shepherd and backed out of the trench mouth into the dripping green. The dog moved beside him without noise despite the shoulder wound, black and tan body low against the ferns. They did not need a grand plan. Just enough disruption to make the search line hesitate and collapse inward on false contact. The soldier angled downslope toward the loudest voices and found them faster than expected. 2 gunmen and 1 local tracker with a radio moving through the cane in a rough spread, trying to read sign too quickly and too confidently. The tracker was the weak point. Not because he was weak, but because he was responsible for certainty. Break certainty, and the whole line fractures. The soldier whistled once from 30 feet off their right flank, just soft enough to sound accidental. The tracker turned immediately. Good ears. The first gunman swung his rifle toward the sound. The second took 1 step too far forward into slick mud. The German shepherd hit him from the side before the rifle settled, taking the knee joint instead of the arm this time, a smarter target against a standing man on bad ground. The scream ripped through the cane. The soldier fired once into the radio unit hanging at the tracker's chest and blew plastic, battery acid, and command structure into the leaves. Then he moved. No pause. No finished shot. Just movement. Let the jungle make numbers feel bigger than they were. It worked better than he expected. The tracker shouted that they were surrounded. Surrounded by 1 old soldier and 1 bleeding dog, but panic doesn't care about arithmetic in thick terrain. The wounded gunman thrashed and fired wild into foliage. The second opened a burst uphill toward the trench they had already abandoned. Good. Waste bullets. Waste time. The German shepherd released and vanished left at the soldier's sharp hand cue, drawing eyes and muzzle lines with him, while the soldier cut right through a wash of thorn and low bamboo. A bullet clipped a branch near his ear. Another hit a trunk and sent wet bark across his neck. Close. Too close. He dropped, rolled behind a fallen log, and fired twice through leaves at muzzle flash rather than body shape. 1 cry. 1 curse. Not dead, maybe, but hurt enough to buy seconds. The dog barked once from farther left now, then twice in rapid succession. More men. Coming in from the lower road. The soldier rose and ran for the east cut before the false ring closed into a real one. He heard pursuit begin at once, uglier now, angrier, less disciplined. Good. Angry men make heavier feet. The stone branch was harder to find than it should have been. Water in jungle country does not always announce itself until you are almost in it, especially when the larger river is still roaring somewhere nearby like a bigger trough swallowing the smaller one. The old soldier found it first through the air, a cooler draft rising from rock, the mineral smell of fast narrow water forcing through stone channels. Then the German shepherd surged ahead, shouldering through a curtain of vines and dropping into a rocky wash, where the jungle floor broke apart into boulders and slick ledges. The branch stream ran there in a hard silver line, narrow but deep in places, disappearing under overhangs and reappearing in white bursts between black rock shelves. The older woman had been right. Above one bend, half hidden by hanging roots and creeper vine, a cave shelf opened in shadow just high enough to hide bodies from the slope above. The children were there, huddled under the overhang, wet, shaking, silent. The teenage boy nearly rose when he saw the soldier return, then froze when he saw the dog's shoulder, and the blood along the old man's sleeve. "They're close," the soldier said. No one wasted time asking how close. The woman was already rearranging the children deeper into the shadow, putting the smallest in the center, the stronger on the edges where hands could keep mouths covered if panic broke. Efficient. Survival had taught her its own ruthless tenderness. Only then did the dog finally stagger. Not fall. Not collapse. Stagger. One step wrong with the wounded shoulder, another with the hindquarters compensating, and suddenly the body that had carried them through a river ambush, a camp break, and a running jungle delay could no longer hide what it had spent. The old soldier caught him before the rock could. The shepherd's weight came into his arms hot and trembling, breath dragging rough through teeth still pinked with enemy blood. The shotgun scrape looked worse here in the gray cave light, pellets furrowed across the upper shoulder and chest, shallow enough to spare the lung but deep enough to bleed every time muscle bunched. The dog licked once at the old soldier's wrist, not comfort, just contact, then tried to rise again, because of course he did. The soldier pressed him down with both hands, and for the first time since the river felt real panic break clean through him. Not for himself. Never quite for himself. For the one creature who had made every right decision faster than any human since dawn, and whose body was now collecting the bill. One of the older girls in the cave, maybe 12, maybe 13, crawled forward without being asked and held out a strip of torn cloth from her own shirt. Her hand shook, but she held them steady enough. The soldier took it, bound what he could, and hated how little it felt like enough. The German shepherd endured the pressure without so much as a growl, eyes still fixed on the cave mouth, still listening. Then came the sound they had been racing all morning to avoid. Engines above. Not one. Several. Closer now, on higher ground, cutting around the ravine, because the pursuers had finally figured out where the ridge route narrowed. The old soldier looked at the woman. She understood at once. "They've reached the road curve," she whispered. "If they know this shelf." She didn't finish. No need. If the vehicles got men onto the ravine edge above them, the cave would become a pit. The children would have nowhere to run except the water channel below, and the water channel ended in rocks no child could survive. The old soldier rose slowly, every muscle in his body aware now that the next decision would cause something permanent. He had one pistol, one magazine, a machete, one wounded German shepherd, one teenage boy too brave for his age, one woman who knew the route, and 12 children who could not outrun vehicles. The engines idled above for half a second, then one door slammed. Another. Boots on gravel. Voices. They had found the ravine road. And then, from the cave mouth, the German shepherd lifted his head and gave one low warning sound toward the stream below. Not above. Below. The soldier turned sharply and saw it a second later in the broken water where the branch stream widened under roots before dropping over stone. A narrow flat-bottomed canoe, hidden under cut foliage and pushed silently upstream by 2 men using poles instead of motors. They were not searching. They were receiving. The jungle route had never been only a chase line. It had always been an extraction corridor. And the men in the canoe were looking straight at the cave. The old soldier saw the canoe and understood the trap before the men in it even raised their weapons. The ravine road above had never been the whole pursuit. It was pressure, noise, control, something to pin prey into the stone branch, while the cleaner retrieval line came silently through the water below. Men who build systems like this do not rely on one path when children, gold, and witnesses are worth too much to lose in a single mistake. The flat-bottomed canoe drifted through the roots with almost no sound at all, one man in the bow steadying a compact rifle against his shoulder, while the other guided with a pole, and looked up toward the cave shelf with the calm focus of someone arriving at a pickup point, not a battlefield. That calm vanished the instant the German shepherd growled. The bowman's head snapped up. His eyes found the cave mouth. Then the rifle came up. The soldier moved before the barrel fully leveled, shoving the nearest children deeper into shadow with one arm, while driving himself low across the cave entrance with the pistol already in hand. The first shot from below cracked off the rock lip and blew splinters of stone across the shelf. The second came from above the ravine road, confirming everything at once. They had the cave bracketed. Water below. Road above. Kill box. "Down!" he roared, and this time every child obeyed because fear had become so large it no longer needed explanation. The older woman yanked the toddler flat against her chest and rolled behind a stone outcrop. The teenage boy threw himself over 2 smaller children near the rear wall. The German shepherd surged forward on instinct, but the soldier caught a handful of harness and checked him just long enough to stop him from launching blindly into crossfire. Not because the dog was wrong. Because he needed him alive for 10 more seconds. 10 seconds was all that separated a slaughter from a chance. The bowman below fired again, trying to walk rounds upward into the cave shadow. A bullet punched through the vine curtain and buried into the timber above the children's heads. Another hit rock and screamed off into the stream. From above, gravel shifted, then bootsteps spread along the ravine edge as the road team searched for a better angle down into the shelf. The old soldier's mind built the geometry instantly. If he stayed in the cave, they would be pinned until the men above found a clean drop line, or the canoe below crept close enough to rake the entrance. If he pushed downward only, the road team would cut them apart from above. The only answer was motion that broke both sight lines at once. He looked at the branch stream, at the black water hammering through stone below the canoe, and at the overhang curving off to the right, where the shelf narrowed into a ledge barely wider than a man's shoulders. Not a path. But maybe enough. The German shepherd saw it too. The dog's head flicked once toward that thin stone run, then back to the cave mouth, then toward the children. Understanding passed between them with the old brutal simplicity of men and dogs, who have survived too many bad places together. The soldier leaned close to the older woman, and spoke through the gunfire in the same hard voice he had used all morning whenever fear threatened to break people into pieces. "When I move, take them right. Stay low. Use the wall. Do not stop." Her face was gray with exhaustion and terror, but she nodded before he finished because she knew the alternative. The teenage boy heard too and tightened his hold on the nearest children, eyes wide and savage with readiness. The canoe bowman fired again. This time the shot struck one of the loose stones at the cave entrance and kicked it inward, clipping the shoulder of the older girl who had helped bandage the dog. She cried out once, more from shock than injury, but blood appeared at once along her upper arm. The smallest children started to sob. The moment was breaking. The soldier rose into it deliberately and fired twice downhill at the canoe. The first shot missed. The second hit the Pullman high in the collarbone and spun him backward into the stream. That was enough. The bowman ducked and lost his angle. The soldier shouted, "Now!" The cave erupted into motion. The older woman pushed 3 children ahead of her onto the right side ledge and practically dragged 2 more after them. The teenage boy half carried the older girl with a grazed shoulder while shoving a little boy forward with his knee when the child froze at the drop beside him. The soldier went last at first, covering the cave mouth and the stream, until the German shepherd broke free of his grip and charged not at the canoe, but at the vine curtain hanging over the lower rock. For one split second it looked mad. Then the dog hit the vines and disappeared through them, revealing what the jungle had hidden all along, a narrow drainage notch where the branch stream had once run higher, cutting a sloped crawl space under the overhang before dropping into the ravine. Not a route for comfort. A route for desperation. Exactly what they needed. The older woman saw it and changed direction instantly, pushing the children down into the notch instead of along the exposed outer ledge. Smarter. Much smarter. The soldier almost laughed once from sheer savage relief. But the road team above had finally found sight of movement and opened fire into the ravine wall. Stone burst. Dirt rained. One round struck so close to his head that the concussion slapped his ear numb. He fired back toward muzzle flash and heard one man above curse and fall away from the edge. The notch was a brutal passage. Tight, wet, dark, and slick with moss, forcing the children to half crawl, half slide single file through stone hardly generous enough for adults. But it solved the most urgent problem. Men above could not see directly into it. Men below could not aim upward through the angle without climbing out of the canoe. The older woman disappeared into the darkness with the first group, pulling the smallest after her. The teenage boy shoved the older girl through next, then turned back to help the lagging children. The German Shepherd reappeared at the mouth of the notch, barking once, twice, not panicked, just driving them faster. The soldier backed toward him, while firing controlled shots at the ravine lip each time a head or barrel showed. He was down to the last few rounds in the current magazine. Bad. The canoe bowman had managed to stay with the boat despite losing the poleman, and was now trying to wedge the craft against the rock below the shelf for a climb. Worse. If that man got onto the stone under the notch before the children cleared, the whole line would bottle up in darkness with nowhere to turn. The soldier shifted aim and shot the canoe's bow rope where it had been looped around the front thwart. The line snapped. Current seized the boat and slammed it sideways into the root tangle. The bowman almost kept his footing, then lost it and dropped into chest-deep water with the rifle thrown wide. Not dead, but no longer climbing. Go! The teenage boy shouted to the last two children still in the open, and one of them obeyed. The other did not. A little girl no older than 5 stood frozen at the notch mouth, staring not at the gunfire, not at the drop, but back toward the cave. The soldier followed her gaze for half a second and saw the reason. In the scramble, one ragged cloth doll had been left behind against the stone wall where the children had huddled. Not much more than wrapped stuffing and stitched eyes. Worthless to armed men. Worth more than the world to a child who had nothing else left. No! The older woman shouted from inside the darkness ahead, already hearing disaster shape itself. The little girl turned to run back. The soldier moved, but the German Shepherd reached her first. The dog cut across her path, blocked her chest with his body, and barked once directly into her face, a startling, commanding sound that froze her in place long enough for the soldier to snatch the doll from the cave floor and throw it through the notch opening into the teenage boy's hands. "Take her!" he shouted. The boy grabbed the child and vanished into the black stone throat just as the ravine lip above exploded with fresh movement. 3 men this time. Reinforcements from the road finally committing to the descent. There was no time left now for careful shots or delaying fire. The soldier slammed a new magazine into the pistol and counted by instinct. Not enough rounds for a sustained fight. Enough for a break. The first man over the ravine edge came down fast on a rope line, trying to beat the notch and cut the escape from below. The soldier dropped him halfway with 2 shots to the chest, and the falling body slammed into the wall hard enough to tangle the rope for the next climber. But while one line broke, another thread took shape below. The canoe bowman had recovered the dropped rifle and, standing waist-deep in the branch stream, was angling for a clean upward shot into the notch mouth. The German Shepherd saw him before the soldier did, and launched from the stone shelf without waiting for command. The jump should have been too far with the shoulder wound. It almost was. The dog hit the bowman high, both of them crashing back into the stream where black water and rock erased shape for one brutal second. Then the river flashed red and white around them as man and dog slammed into the root snarl beside the wrecked canoe. The soldier fired once toward the moving knot of bodies, not to hit the dog, but to pin the rifleman's head down if he still had enough control to lift the barrel. The shot struck water en route. Good enough. The German Shepherd surfaced half onto the rock shelf, dragging the man's arm with him by the sleeve and flesh beneath, then tore free and clawed back toward the notch mouth, slipping once, recovering, still coming. The bowman did not rise again. The soldier grabbed harness and pushed the dog bodily into the darkness of the stone chute ahead of him, then followed backward, firing one-handed at the ravine edge as the first rope-tangled climber cut himself loose and the road team started descending by hand instead. The notch swallowed sound badly. Gunfire became thunder inside stone. Children cried ahead. Water echoed underfoot. The passage narrowed, widened, then dropped sharply enough that the older kids had to catch the little ones and pass them down rather than let them tumble. The old soldier moved by touch and memory of direction alone, one hand on wet wall, the other pushing the German shepherd ahead when the dog faltered from blood loss. The shoulder wound was costing him now. The dog still worked, still listened, still growled warning whenever pursuit noise sharpened behind them, but the body had begun to drag in ways it had hidden before. The teenage boy reappeared once in the dark, crawling back uphill against the line to help move the smallest child down a stone lip. Brave again. Too brave. But this time useful. The older woman's voice came from farther ahead, echoing thinly through the rock. Light! Good. There was an exit. Maybe not safe, but open. The notch emptied them onto a lower shelf above the split stream, where the water divided around a huge boulder and vanished under hanging jungle roots before widening again farther east. The place was a maze of black stone, spray, and dense overgrowth. Better cover than the cave. Harder approach than the ravine road. No room for trucks. Perfect for a short reset if they could hold long enough to keep the children moving downstream afterward. The soldier got the first real count then. All 12 children. The older woman. The teenage boy. The older girl bleeding from the arm but conscious. The river child shaking but alive. The toddler still carried. All here. The German shepherd stood beside him with his sides pumping and blood darkening one foreleg and shoulder. Here too. For 1 second, the old soldier let himself believe they had broken the bracket cleanly. Then the German shepherd turned toward the upper notch exit and gave a low growl that raised every hair on the soldier's neck. Pursuit had not stopped. It had only compressed. Voices entered the stone passage behind them. Close now. Too close. One of the men laughed once, breathless with effort, and called out in the local language that if the old man surrendered, the children would still be worth something. The older woman went white at those words in a way that only someone who had heard such calculations too often can go white. The soldier felt something in him go colder than rage. Worth something. That was what these people were to the men behind them. Cargo with breathing lungs. Exchange weight. River-proof. He looked at the children huddled among the rocks, and knew the running phase of this escape was ending whether he liked it or not. The terrain ahead might hide them for a while, but not at this pace, not with the dog bleeding, not with 12 children too exhausted to keep vanishing forever. Somewhere beyond this split stream, there might be villages, or patrol tracks, or clean help. But somewhere behind them were men who knew routes, road access, water access, and how much money they were losing with every minute these children stayed alive. That meant only one thing remained. The jungle had to stop being a route. It had to become a battleground. He rose slowly, checked the pistol, and saw the truth in cold metal terms. Few rounds left. Machete still good. 1 wounded German shepherd. 1 teenage boy who would never stay put if told. 1 older woman strong enough to move the group but not fight a line of armed men. He looked at the stream. Fast, divided, shallow in some parts, deep in others, cutting around the giant boulder before dropping east through a narrower black throat. The children could move there with guidance. Hard. Dangerous. But possible. The armed men would have to split again, climb rock, commit one by one. Better. Much better. The old soldier crouched in front of the teenage boy and spoke with the full weight of command he had been carrying in silence since dawn. You take them into the water and stay on the right side of the split. Follow her. Do not stop for anything you hear behind you. The boy opened his mouth to argue. The soldier cut him off. That's the job. The older woman understood first. She grabbed the boy's jaw lightly and forced his eyes to hers until he nodded once in furious helpless agreement. Good enough. The soldier then turned to the German shepherd, set both hands on the dog's face for one heartbeat, and whispered the hardest order he had given all day. "Stay with them." The dog looked back at him, and in that look lived everything the man feared. The shepherd understood the order. He also understood exactly what it meant. Because from inside the notch behind them came the scrape of boots on wet stone, the first beam of a flashlight cutting through the dark, and the unmistakable metallic sound of a man racking a fresh round into a shotgun. The sound of the shotgun being racked inside the stone notch settled everything. Not because it gave the old soldier hope, and not because it made the danger clearer. It settled everything because it stripped the moment down to what it really was. There would be no clean escape without cost. No miracle path opening through the jungle. No sudden rescue team appearing through the trees to take the weight from his hands. There was only this split stream, these children, the wounded German shepherd, the older woman who had survived long enough to become iron, the furious boy forced into manhood too soon, and the armed men climbing wet stone behind them with the calm cruelty of people who believed children were property and mercy was weakness. The soldier had heard sounds like that before, the cold metallic preparation of a man certain he is about to finish helpless people. Years earlier, on another continent under another canopy, that sound had come just before a village hut was cleared with fire and buckshot, while screaming civilians were still inside. He had arrived too late that day. He had carried the memory of that lateness for years, like a stone under the ribs. But not now. Not here. He rose from his crouch beside the split stream, and felt all the fear inside him harden into something narrower and more useful. Behind him, the children were already being moved into the water by the older woman and the teenage boy, tiny bodies shivering, slipping, grabbing at roots and each other as the current pushed around their knees. The German shepherd stood torn between two instincts so powerful they made his whole body tremble. Obey the command to stay with the children, or refuse it and remain where the threat still had eyes on his person. The soldier saw the conflict in the dog and understood it too well to waste words trying to sweeten it. He only touched the side of the shepherd's neck once and gave the order again, quieter this time, because the quiet ones are the hardest to break. "With them." The dog obeyed. That was the cruelest part of loyalty. It doesn't always choose the thing it wants. It chooses the thing asked of it by the one voice that matters most. The German shepherd turned and moved into the stream beside the smallest children, body low, shoulder bleeding steadily into the black water, guiding them rightward along the safer side of the split, while the older woman went first, and the teenage boy brought up the rear of that fragile, terrified little column. The old soldier watched them go for one heartbeat longer than he should have, fixing the shape of the dog in his mind the way men fix the last sight of home before walking into places where home may no longer exist when they return. Then he turned back to the notch just as the first flashlight beam cut through the dark and found the rock shelf where they had been standing. A voice behind the light laughed once. "Out of road," it said in the local tongue. "Out of river. Out of luck." The soldier stepped into the mouth of the split stream, water curling cold around his boots, pistol steady in one hand and machete low in the other. "You're the one out of time," he said, and fired at the light. The beam shattered. Glass and sparks burst backward into the notch. A man cursed and fired the shotgun blind, the blast booming through the confined stone like thunder trapped underground. Pellets tore chunks out of the stream wall where the soldier had been a second earlier, but he was already moving, cutting left across the boulder line where wet stone and spray would break a direct rush. Another pursuer came behind the shotgun man with a carbine raised, but the narrow passage forced them single file for one fatal moment, and single file men die quickly when the man facing them understands bottlenecks. The soldier fired once into the lead thigh. The shotgun carrier folded screaming against the wall, jamming the notch with his own collapsing body. The second man tried to pull him aside, and took a machete slash across the weapon hand for the effort. The blade bit deep, the carbine clattered, and both men fell together into the water-churned stone throat in a tangle of blood, boots, and panic. Behind them, more voices rose in furious confusion, but confusion in tight terrain kills speed faster than bullets do. The old soldier backed another 3 steps down the stream split, forcing the pursuit into the open, where he could shape the next seconds. Above the ravine, the truck men were still trying to find angles into the gorge, shouting to one another through the trees, but the water and stone were now breaking their lines apart exactly as he had hoped. He was no longer trying to escape them cleanly. He was turning their numbers against themselves. The right-hand branch of the split stream narrowed quickly around the giant boulder, then dropped over a series of short rock shelves into a deeper ravine lane beyond. The older woman had already gotten the first children around the bend. The teenage boy, waist-deep and grim-faced, was passing the smallest one by one along the ledge while the German shepherd stayed planted between the rear children and the notch, barking only when one tiny body froze or slipped. Even wounded, even under command he hated, the dog was still keeping the line intact. The old soldier gave them one last glance, saw the river child clutching the older woman's arm, and the little girl with the cloth doll pressed to her chest, saw all 12 still alive, and then the next threat arrived from above. A man rappelled over the ravine edge on a rope line, dropping fast with a pistol in one hand, and boots slamming rock as he searched for sight of the children below. Better trained than the others. Calm. Focused. Wrong man to let reach full descent. The soldier switched aim and shot the rope anchor point where it scraped across the upper stone lip. Not a perfect cut. Enough. The line jerked, frayed, and snapped under the man's weight. He fell 15 feet into the boulder pool below, striking shoulder first and disappearing into black water before surfacing once in a burst of white panic and blood. The stream took him instantly, slammed him sideways into stone, and carried him downstream out of the fight. One more gone. Not enough. The notch behind him unclogged at last. Another pursuer stepped over the wounded shotgun man, with murder in his posture, and brought a short rifle up toward the stream branch. This one did not rush. Smart. He stayed in the shelter of the rocks, using the body of his wounded companion as partial cover, while another man behind him fed directions from the darkness. The old soldier knew what came next because he would have done the same. Suppressing fire to pin him, while a flank team worked down from the ravine top, and the lower road men tried to intercept the children farther east. He had slowed them, bloodied them, broken their first contact, but if he stayed at this choke point much longer, the entire weight of the network would settle here. He needed something that ended pursuit, not just delayed it. His eyes flicked once to the boulder pool below the notch mouth, where storm debris had jammed against the rock and water pressured through a narrow gap. There, half hidden under branches and foam, lay one of the fuel cans that must have washed down from the camp boats after the fire. Luck. Or maybe the jungle's own form of balance. He fired it at once. Missed. Fired again. The round punched metal. The can split and spilled a slick rainbow sheen across the trap foam and the slow pocket beneath the notch. Not enough by itself. He reached into the pocket of his wet shirt and found the waterproof match tube he carried for the cabin stove and emergency shelter fires. One match. Then maybe none. He struck it on the tube cap, and for an absurd instant the tiny flame seemed too small to matter in all that water and gunmetal and death. Then he tossed it into the fuel wash and stepped sideways as the pool below the notch bloomed into fire. It was not a movie blast. It was worse. Flame rolled low and fast over the trapped fuel pocket, raced up the soaked debris, and surged straight into the legs of the 2 men trying to force the choke point. Fire in tight stone causes a different kind of panic than open burning. It feels personal. It crawls. It corners. The shotgun man, already bleeding and half-trapped, screamed with such raw animal terror that the men behind him recoiled and crashed into one another trying to pull back from the sudden wall of heat and flame. The second man fired wildly, as he stumbled, rounds ricocheting into the stream wall and ceiling. One of them clipped the old soldier high in the left side, not a full hit, more a tearing graze that burned across his ribs like a hot knife. Pain flashed white for half a second, but he stayed upright, because there was no part of this moment that had room for falling. He used the fire the way it had to be used, one final confusion maker. He shouted to the boy and the woman to move the children faster downstream, then backed around the giant boulder and into the narrowing ravine, where the stream ran deeper and the rock walls rose higher. The German shepherd looked back at him from the waterline, ears up, body angled to return despite the command. The old soldier knew then that he had reached the last edge of authority. The next decision could not be given twice. "Take them!" he shouted, voice breaking into the ravine over gunfire and flame, and the dog obeyed again, harder this time, because obedience under heartbreak is the purest form of trust. The ravine beyond the boulder was both gift and trap. It hid the children from the road teams above, but it also narrowed the whole escape into a stone throat where sound traveled too well and options too poorly. The older woman drove the group forward into waist-deep water, where the stream widened under a curtain of roots. The teenage boy carried the toddler now, one arm around the child, one hand keeping another little boy from slipping under. The older girl with the shoulder wound was pale, but still moving. The river child stumbled once, and the German shepherd shouldered her upright without breaking stride. The old soldier came last, bleeding at the ribs, breath shorter now, pistol nearly dry, machete slick in his hand. Behind him, the fuel fire had forced the first pursuit line to stop, but above and ahead he could hear new movement. Men were running the ravine lip eastward, trying to leapfrog the escape line and cut them off where the gorge opened. The older woman heard it too. She looked back only once and said the words no one there wanted. "The falls!" He understood immediately. Not a cliff. A drop. Maybe survivable for one strong adult. Not for a line of exhausted children. Unless there was something below. A pool? A shelf? A hidden cutout? "How bad?" he asked. "Too bad," she answered, and kept moving. The jungle does not give better briefing language than that. They reached the falls faster than he hoped and slower than he feared. The stream bent sharply left, and then vanished over a black ledge 12 or 15 feet high into a plunge pool choked with white water and swirling branches, before the channel widened into a lower run disappearing east through dense jungle. Too bad, yes. But not impossible. The pool below was deep enough. The current after it looked manageable, if the children were caught fast and moved immediately. The older woman knew it too. She pointed to a narrow descent crack beside the drop. "I go down. Catch them." The teenage boy nodded before being told, and started lining the children up along the rock wall. The old soldier turned upstream, because of course the pursuit noise had sharpened again. Men were coming through both the ravine lip and the smoke-dark choke point now. They had lost enough people to be angry and enough cargo to be desperate. Desperate men stop valuing survival if they think money and witnesses are flowing away with the river. He checked the pistol. 2 rounds. No more. Fine. 2 rounds is still more than 0, and sometimes the difference between 2 and 0 is what gets 12 children over a falls. The first man into view above the bend wore no field rig, no river clothes, no local dust. Clean boots even now. Dark jacket despite the heat. One of the command men then. Not camp muscle. Not boat retrieval. Management. He came down the ravine wall carefully with a carbine, and a face so empty of ordinary humanity that the old soldier recognized him at once for what he was, a man who had spent years making the ugly parts of other men profitable while keeping his own hands clean enough to shake at offices and contracts. He saw the children at the falls, saw the old soldier standing between them and the channel, and smiled, not because he thought he would win cleanly, but because he believed he could still salvage enough. "You don't know what you've found," he called over the water. The old soldier almost laughed at the stupidity of the line. "I know enough," he answered, and fired the first of the last 2 rounds into the rock above the man's climbing hand. Stone shattered. The man slipped, caught himself, swore, and lost precious seconds. Good. The second round he saved. Always save the last round until the world proves what deserves it most. Behind him, the first child went over the falls. Not thrown. Guided. The teenage boy held the little body by the life jacket straps, while the older woman below shouted direction from the descent crack. Then the child dropped into the pool and came up screaming but alive. Another went next. Then another. The German shepherd stood at the lip with the remaining children, barking each one forward when terror froze them, backing them from the edge when they rushed wrong, turning fear into rhythm. The old soldier had never seen anything in his life more beautiful or more terrible than that wounded dog standing beside a jungle falls, blood on his shoulder, commanding children through water toward survival, while armed men closed from behind. The command man above recovered faster than expected and started down again, lower now, using roots instead of bare rock, carbine finally settling into angle. That was what the last bullet was for. The old soldier waited until the barrel leveled toward the dog, then shot the man through the face. The body dropped without drama, striking twice on stone before the ravine took it out of sight. But the shot solved only him. More boots were coming. More voices. The older woman had 6 children below now. 5 still above with the boy, the dog, and the old soldier. The falls had become the only door left, and doors become graves if men reach them too soon. The soldier grabbed the next smallest child and put them over himself, dropping hard into the plunge pool, where the older woman caught the body and shoved it toward the lower bank. Back up the descent crack immediately. Another child. Then another. The teenage boy slipped on the third transfer and nearly went over badly, but the German shepherd hit his legs with a shoulder brace and kept him upright long enough to recover. Good dog. Impossible dog. There were only 2 children left above now, besides the boy. The little girl with the cloth doll. And the river child. The first pursuer broke into the bend behind them just then, weapon raised, and the old soldier knew they were out of time. He climbed the rock lip instead of going down, machete in hand now, blood soaking warm along his side under the wet shirt. The man fired too fast and hit stone. The soldier closed the distance in 3 brutal steps and drove the machete into the rifle stock, knocking the barrel aside before smashing the hilt into the man's throat. They went over the edge together, but only one of them went into the pool. The soldier caught the ledge at the last second, hauled back up on pure rage, and kicked the choking man down into the white water below, where the older woman finished the matter with a rock the size of a helmet. No hesitation left in any of them now. Not after cages. Not after river straps. Not after hearing, worth something, spoken over children like a price. Only the river child remained above with the teenage boy and the dog. She stood at the lip, shaking so badly she could barely stay upright. Not because she feared the drop alone. Because drops, rivers, cages, guns, and men had all become one thing in her body now. The teenage boy tried to coax her, and she recoiled. The older woman shouted from below that there was no time. The old soldier climbed toward them, as another voice echoed through the ravine behind. Close. Too close. The German shepherd stepped in front of the river child, blocking out the water with his body, the way he had blocked the little girl from the cave doll. The child locked on him instantly through all the terror. The dog barked once. Then again. Short. Direct. Not danger this time. Follow. The old soldier reached them, took one look at the closing shapes in the bin behind, and made the final choice. He grabbed the teenage boy by the shoulder and shoved him toward the descent crack. Go now! The boy resisted for one furious second, then saw the same truth and went, dropping to the lower hold. The old soldier crouched in front of the river child and pulled her eyes to his. You jump with him, he said, setting her tiny hand into the fur at the German shepherd's neck. Do not let go. She stared at him in terror. He put his forehead against hers just once. Trust the dog. The first muzzle flash lit the ravine behind them. The old soldier turned and took the bullet through the upper shoulder instead of the spine, because he moved soon enough and because luck, once in a while, still remembers the men who keep standing. Pain tore through him hot and immediate, but he stayed up long enough to shout the only word that mattered. Now! The German shepherd leapt. Not away from the child. With her. The river child clung to the harness, and neck fur as dog and child vanished together over the falls into white water and spray. The old soldier spun back toward the bend, bloody, one-armed, machete up, and met the next man in the ravine face to face before he could fire again. He did not fight to win anymore. He fought to keep the gorge blocked for 5 more seconds. 5 for the dog. 5 for the child. 5 for the living proof running downstream below. Steel flashed. Water roared. Men shouted. Somewhere under all of it, from the plunge pool below, the German shepherd barked once. Alive. That was enough. The old soldier gave ground one step, then another, drawing the pursuers onto the slick rock lip where blood, spray, and panic made footing worthless. The lead man lunged. The soldier twisted, caught cloth and weapon together, and threw all their combined weight sideways into the unstable edge above the falls. The rock shelf, already cracked by years of water and one morning of violence, gave way under all of them with a sound like the ravine itself finally deciding it had seen enough. Stone broke. Men cursed. One body fell clear. Another caught root and screamed. The old soldier hit the plunge pool like dropped iron and vanished into black water beneath foam and shattered rock. For one endless cold second there was only roar, current, pain, and the pressure of the river trying to close over his head and keep him. Then hands found his collar from one side. Fur hid his face from the other. The German shepherd, half swimming, half clawing against the current, was still there, and so was the older woman braced on a lower shelf with the teenage boy beside her, dragging both soldier and dog toward the bank, while the children cried and shouted in broken, terrified voices that sounded, suddenly and impossibly, like life instead of loss. By the time the remaining pursuers reached the broken lip above, the lower channel had already taken the living away from them. The children were moving east through the widened stream with the older woman leading, the teenage boy carrying the toddler again, the older girl helping the river child keep one hand on the German shepherd's harness while the dog, limping now, and half drowning in exhaustion, still forced himself to stay between the smallest bodies and the deeper current. The old soldier staggered after them with blood down one arm, one shoulder gone nearly useless, lungs burning, vision narrowing at the edges though he would not allow himself the softness of falling yet. Above, voices shouted. A few rounds hit water too far behind to matter. Then the jungle finally did what it had been threatening to do all morning. Rain came back in one sudden hard wall, hammering the ravine, flattening sound, swallowing sight, and turning every track, set line, and road edge into chaos. The forest chose a side at last. And under that pounding rain, with the traffic network broken, the children carried out alive, the gold lost to the river, and their armed handlers scattered, burned, drowned, or left behind, the escape stopped being a chase. It became survival with a future. They reached the Split River Flats near dusk, where the jungle began thinning toward older fishing huts and abandoned survey clearings not yet fully reclaimed by vines. That was where the first real help found them, not because the authorities had been fast, but because the older woman knew of one man who still traded medicine and fuel through those back channels without asking the wrong questions first. He saw the children, saw the wounded soldier, saw the blood-soaked German shepherd standing only because he had not yet accepted what flesh had already spent. And he sent for everyone. Local police, military patrol, relief workers, people with lights, stretchers, radios, and enough horror in their faces to prove the truth could still strike good men like lightning. The old soldier held on until then through nothing but command habit and the sight of the children being counted one by living hands that did not own them. 12. Then 13, because a final child stumbled from the older woman's memory and from the rear of the line, where everyone thought the older girl was only holding a bundle of cloth. 13 children alive. The number hit him harder than the bullet. He looked at the German shepherd then. The dog's legs finally folded beneath him on the wet earth, not in defeat, but in completion, and the soldier dropped beside him with what remained of his own strength. The ending that followed did not happen in one perfect wave. Real endings never do. They come in pieces. The network hidden along the jungle rivers was wider than one camp, and smaller than the men behind it thought. Records burned badly but not completely. The gold case was recovered days later from a snag miles downstream, enough of it intact to lead investigators into names, routes, and accounts that had survived too comfortably under official blindness. River posts were raided. Trucks were found. Graves were found too. The older woman gave testimony through a voice that shook only once. The teenage boy never stopped counting the younger children, even in safety for weeks afterward, waking at night to make sure the number still held. The river child kept one hand on the German shepherd's for every chance she got until the day she no longer needed to do it every minute to believe she had stayed alive. And the old soldier, after surgery, stitches, blood loss, and one long fever that nearly dragged him under in a hospital bed far from the jungle, woke to find the dog beside him on a blanket the staff had no business allowing in that room and did not care enough to remove. The shepherd's shoulder was bandaged. One ear was scarred. The muzzle looked older than it had before dawn that day. But the eyes were open, clear, present, still on duty until the old soldier put one shaking hand on his neck and said the only order left worth giving. Rest. Months later, when the rains had changed and the river ran lower and clearer through the jungle bends, the old soldier went back once. Not alone. Never alone again in the ways that matter. The German shepherd walked beside him slowly, scars under the fur, stepped still a little stiff from what the shotgun and the falls had taken. They stood above the basin where the first child had cried out of the mist, and the soldier listened to the water move through the stones without the old helpless guilt rising to choke him. Not because the river had changed. Because the ending had. The child survived. All 13 did. The hidden camps were gone. The gold was no longer feeding cages. And the dog, who had found a crying voice in the jungle, read danger in water before any human eye could see it, leapt into gunfire, held children together through falling stone and river drops, and obeyed even the hardest command love can ask, stood there under the trees with his head level and the quiet dignity of a soul who had carried enough darkness to make room for light again. The old soldier looked down at him, and felt something he had not trusted in years settle into place at last. Redemption is not clean. It does not give back the lost years, the dead, or the scars. But sometimes it gives a man one true ending where there should have been another grave. The German shepherd looked up at him then, and for the first time since dawn on the river, there was no threat left in the air, no hidden weapon, no cry unanswered. Only jungle, water, breath, and the simple impossible truth that loyalty had dragged them all the way through.